Chat. Hi, you guys. This is the book chat for Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. At first glance, you may recognize the names Aristotle and Dante. They are the names of a famous Greek philosopher and an Italian poet, but this book is not about that Aristotle or that Dante. Instead, it's about two teenage boys who kind of form an unlikely friendship. So as you can see on the cover here, Benjamin Alida Sainz has won a ton of awards for young adult fiction. 4 stamps on here is pretty unusual, which tells us from the very start that he's a highly respected and regarded novelist. And this story has won a ton of awards. It's really a beautiful story that that I loved reading. I read it for the first time this year. So let me tell you a couple things that I love about this book. First, I love that Aristotle and Dante are two very unlikely friends. Aristotle is a Mexican-American boy who talks a lot about having kind of dark skin and a Mexican-American identity and not quite understanding what that's about, whereas Dante is a very traditional kind of white boy. And so that's kind of one way that their friendship is unlikely. A second way is that Aristotle is really kind of closed off and shy and not expressive with like kind of his feelings or his thoughts or ideas, whereas Dante is really expressive. He is an artist and a poet, and he is just kind of very honest with how he thinks and feels. A lot of that has to do with their family dynamics. So Aristotle's family doesn't really share a lot of information with each other. They have a lot of like deep, dark secrets that you find out about as you read through the story. They don't have a lot of affection. His father is a war veteran and suffers from PTSD, so is pretty guarded. And he has a brother that's in prison that his parents won't ever talk about, so he doesn't know what the story is about that. Whereas Dante's family is really communicative, and they hug each other a lot, and so Aristotle is the main character in this story, the protagonist and our narrator, and through his friendship with Dante, he starts to kind of sort through some of the issues that he has to come to terms with in understanding his personal identity. So that's the best way that I can kind of describe this book. So the things that I love about this book, I love Aristotle's character. I love Dante's character. I love how much their friendship with each other kind of helps them both come to terms with who they are. When I think about a story that's coming of age or about growing up, this book really fits that category in the way that I think about it, because Aristotle has to sort through all kinds of identity related stuff to kind of figure out who he is by the end of this book. And so some of that is family dynamics, some of that is friendship, some of that is cultural and racial identity, a lot of that is sexual identity. And so all of those themes kind of come up in this story to make it a really rich reading experience. So the passage I am going to read for you is from chapter 10. And here goes. I liked when my mom told me about how she felt about things. She seemed to be able to do that. Not that we talked that much, but sometimes we did, and it was good, and I felt like I knew her. And I didn't feel like I knew a lot of people. When she talked to me, she was different than when she was being my mother. When she was being my mother, she had a lot of ideas about who I should be. And I hated that, fought her on that, didn't want her input. I didn't think it was my job to accept what everyone said I was and who I should be. Maybe if you weren't so quiet, Ari. Maybe if you could just be more disciplined. Yeah, everyone had suggestions as to what was wrong with me and what I should become, especially my older sisters. Because I was the youngest, because I was a surprise, because I was born too late, because my older brother was in prison, and maybe my mother and father blamed themselves. If only they'd said something, done something. They weren't going to make that mistake again. So I was stuck with my family's guilt, a guilt that not even my mother could talk about. She sometimes mentioned my brother in passing, but she never said his name. So now I was the only son, and I felt the weight of a son in a Mexican family, even though I didn't want it. But that was the way it was. It made me mad that I'd felt like I'd betrayed my family by mentioning my brother to Dante. It didn't feel good. There were so many ghosts in our house. The ghost of my brother, the ghost of my father's war, the ghosts of my sister's voices. And I thought that maybe there were ghosts inside of me that I hadn't even met yet. They were there, lying in wait. I picked up my old journal and thumbed through the pages. I found an entry that I'd written a week after I turned 15. I don't like being 15. I didn't like being 14. I didn't like being 13. I didn't like being 12. I didn't like being 11. 10 was good. I liked being 10. I don't know why, but I had a very good year when I was in the 5th grade. The 5th grade was very good. Mrs. Pedregan was a great teacher, and for some reason, everyone seemed to like me. A good year, an excellent year, 5th grade. But now, at 15, well, things are a little awkward. My voice is doing funny things, and I keep running into things. My mom says my reflexes are trying to keep up with the fact that I'm growing so much. I don't much care for this growing thing. My body's doing things I can't control, and I just don't like it. All of a sudden, I have hair all over the place. Hair under my arms, and hair on my legs, and hair around my, well, hair between my legs. Okay, I'm not liking it. I even got hair growing on my toes. What's that about? And my feet keep getting bigger and bigger. What's with the big feet? When I was 10, I was kind of small and I wasn't worried about hair. The only thing I was worried about was trying to speak perfect English. I made up my mind that year when I was 10 that I wasn't going to sound like another Mexican. I was going to be an American. And when I talked, I was going to sound like one. So what if I don't look exactly like an American? What does an American look like anyway? Does an American have big hands and big feet and hair around his, well, hair between his legs? Reading my own words embarrassed the hell out of me. I mean, what a bandejo. I had to be the world's biggest loser, writing about hair and stuff about my body. No wonder I stopped keeping a journal. It was like keeping a record of my own stupidity. Why would I want to do that? Why would I want to remind myself what an asshole I was? Okay, so that's a section from this story. I want to keep reading, but I'm not going to. Okay, so who is this book for? For starters, it's one of our longer books in book club. It's 360 pages long. So it's for a reader who has the time to do the reading. So you should know that. It's also for readers who like to understand what motivates people to behave the way that they do. That's kind of the underlying thread in this story, is kind of understanding the motivations for his parents' actions, the motivations for Dante's actions, the motivations for his own actions and ideas. And then I think it's really for any teenage audience, because so many of the themes and topics that are addressed in this book are just real growing up kinds of issues and topics and themes. So I loved this book. I know I keep saying that with all of the book talks, but we've chosen them because they are really spectacular. I love this book. I loved Aristotle and I love Dante and I love them as friends, and there's lots of tensions and conflicts in their friendship and with parent relationships. And so if you are interested in reading stories that deal with issues of sexual identity, that deal with growing up, that deal with identity and kind of realizing how your family plays a role in who you are and coming to terms with all of those sorts of things, then this is definitely the book for you. Hopefully you all love it as much as I love it, and everybody gets a chance to read it at some point.